So, Khozema, there have been so many changes in terms of technology and how that touches the CFO. I'm wondering on a macro level, how do you think that changes in the technology industry broadly and some advances have changed that role in a fundamental way of the CFO?
Well, I think there's a couple big categories that have been particularly useful for finance and then I think for companies more broadly. I think one area, to state the obvious, is cloud computing, which has provided on-off flexibility and I think just generally greater opportunities for customization, but also the ability to flip the switch if priorities change. So I think that's one that's become really important. I think the second one, probably automation, and I think there were things that you obviously could do, for example, in an industrial factory from an automation perspective for a long time, but applying those to the workplace and workflows and financial processes, I think that's become incredibly prevalent, and I think a lot of companies like ours are obviously using those and adopting technologies like that more rapidly. And then I think with the passage of time, technologies like AI and ML, right, are going to become even more pervasive. And I think we're still very early days, I would say, and stuff like that. We're starting to experiment with some technologies there, but I think all of those are technologies that didn't even exist, really, just 10, 15 years ago. And I think now we're able to harness those for not just productivity reasons, but for incredible analytical firepower.
And I'm sorry,
No,
I would echo part of what you had said. When I really think about CFO and just the finance organization overall, first of all, I would echo the automation. I think that's an awesome opportunity for us. It's been a big priority for my team for the last year, really focusing on robotic process automation to really drive productivity, but also freeing up people to be able to do a lot of the things that we never have time to do, which is driving the insights. And that's the other part, is digital transformation really enabling better decisions faster, and that so CFO, so the finance organization, so C-suite at large can really have access to other tools such as real-time data in dashboards and so forth to just be able to make decisions at a faster pace.
Mm-hmm. And Jenny, what has been Smartsheet's approach to automation?
What has been so exciting for me is that as I've grown in my finance career, I've been in finance for most of my career, I remember a lot of times where I was trying to find the information so that I could give it to my CFO, and that would take me the full day. And also there were times when there was information hoarding. Information is power. So can you please tell me what the bookings are as of right now? What's transformed for me now is I don't have to do any of that. Smartsheet is a product that we use at our company, but we also use NetSuite, we use Tableau. I can go in and get it myself at any moment in time. It's so empowering. It makes my work so much more fun. And everybody kind of has the access they need to the information to do their job and do their best work.
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean in terms of, how your team that is no longer doing rote tasks is spending its time to really be value add, Jenny?
It's all about delivering on the business strategy and the objective. We just finished our plan for our fiscal year 20, which started February 1. And so we're all about enabling the business, making sure we've got the right metrics that we're watching as we evolve, looking for the signals to invest more. That's one of our opportunities is how many salespeople do we need? Well, what happens if the pipeline is really strong? Do you hire more? And because we have information and we're seeing it in real time, it's much more easy to say, yeah, let's do it now versus, oh, look what happened. Now we should do it. So we're able to make those decisions faster, as you said, and just kind of keep that flywheel going.
Mm-hmm. And Khozema, there's so many different software options now. In terms of applications, it really can be pretty dizzying. Everyone is promising that it's going to make the life of a CFO or other executives easier, that it's going to make running a business easier. And I'm wondering if better software automatically leads to better business outcomes, or if there are other things that you have to sort of keep in mind, other processes you have to consider to get the outcomes that you want.
Well, I think there's two sides to it. So I think no doubt the software that's available today is much, much better than what was available 20 years ago. So I think that's clear. I think at the same time, I mean, there's no software package that is a panacea, right? So I think anybody that tells you that you implement XYZ and it's going to save your life, the promise of that sounds great. It's not going to play out that way, right? So I think one of the things that we found, both in a variety of areas in which we're trying to implement various software packages is that it's important to do the process redesign in conjunction with the software implementation. I think historically a lot of companies would go really heavy on the customization side. Now customization's easier with cloud-based products. I think that's for sure, but most companies would go really heavy into customization. You'd be stuck with some level of on-prem software, and then you would constantly be redesigning around some broken process that was inside. And I think now, the software packages that are available, they kind of force you to adopt a new process, improve that process once and for all, and then design your data flows around it so that you can unlock the analytics that have been described earlier. And I think that's just been a fundamental change versus the way that it was done previously.
The one thing that I would add to that too is you mentioned the data and the data analytics is you're only able to make those great decisions if you actually have good, clean data. And so everyone always talks about, wow, use these analytical tools and they're fabulous, and plop it on top of your data lake. But if your data lake looks like a murky pond, which I'd love to say ours is perfect, but it's not. And I hope everyone else there has perfectly clean data, but I don't know that that's the reality. And so you really have to work on getting that data at least somewhat clean so that, to your point, you can actually have a tool that then is useful.
A data swamp, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jenny talked her book a little bit and said that you guys like to use Smartsheet at Smartsheet. And I'm wondering, Michelle, if there are any tools in particular that you think have been particularly beneficial when we think about automation, when we think about making your job easier and making your team provide more value than just do rote tasks.
I would say the two that we use are both data analytics tools, both ClickView and Tableau. We use both of those. And it's been a really big push for us at the company because we are really trying to help everyone get much more data literate. And it's not just because, wow, that's a cool thing, there's lots of data out there, we should all look at it. It's that if we want to make those better decisions faster, if everybody doesn't have access, as you said, Jenny, to the data, and everyone's not looking at the same data, you actually can't participate in making the decision or actually solving a problem. And so those are two that we've really used a lot, and we are trying to bring up the level of data literacy just across the whole company.
I also think, one of the older challenges was, well, I have this data. Well, it doesn't tie to your data. Like headcount data has always been one of the things that I've found there's been divergence on. So being able to build, let's say, your data warehouse, we actually have a BI department that is responsible for making sure our data is consistent. And you always find discrepancies, and they're cleaning it up. But it makes it a lot easier to all be on the same page.
Khozema, I'm wondering, with all of these tools that are out now, have they changed the way that you consider prospective job candidates for your team? What are you looking for in terms of human talent? Has it changed now with these tools versus maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that if somebody has technology literacy, you have a significant leg up relative to other job candidates. I think that's for sure. I think we use BI, for example, tools as well. And I think someone's ability to, these BI tools, they're great, but they also do require a little bit of light coding, shall we say. And I think someone's ability to do that and access data and harness analytics in a way that others fundamentally can't, if we find candidates like that, we grab every one of them. There just aren't a lot of people out there like that have that skill set. And I think, to both of the points that have been raised, clean data is an issue, finding the right data is an issue. There's never been a problem with availability of data. It's always been harnessing it. And I think these individuals who are particularly skilled in analytics tools and BI tools are really, really valuable.
If you go to the other end of the spectrum, which we were talking about earlier with automation, it's actually one of the things that we've done is actually we've started teaching our own people teaching them some of the tools on how do you actually program a bot. We have what we call Bot Boot Camp. And it is bringing in our employees and teaching them so they can be much more self-sufficient. And we've done that with a number of different tools. A number of our folks are learning Python. But it really is great if you can find those people out as job candidates and bring them in. And we are finding that more and more folks have that. It amazes me when we bring in our interns, the level of skills they have. It's incredible. But then also taking the employees you have today and really investing in teaching them some of those skills.
We do the exact same thing. We run folks through boot camps, and we, inculcate them really with all sorts of skills that they might not otherwise have, so that we can harness those capabilities too.
And Jenny, I'm wondering, how have you seen some of the changes in the broader technological environment manifest itself in your own career? You had a great career at eBay. How have things changed for you since then?
Oh gosh, so much better now. I would say that. I remember once I was at eBay and I was running investor relations and FP&A, and we produced all of the information for our CFO in a PowerPoint deck or in Excel, and every Sunday we were asking the business functions to send these models to us or these charts to us, and we would combine them and make them really pretty. So Monday morning, our CFO had this deck. And I came up with this great idea that I'm sure everyone in this room has come up with, to create a dashboard for him that could be real time, right? And I was like thinking I was so brilliant, and so I went to IT and I said, okay, we're gonna create a dashboard. And the first thing our head of IT asked me was, okay, do you have budget for this? And I'm like, well, no. He's like, well, it's gonna cost about $200,000. And by the way, we have like 25 other projects we're working on, so get in line. And it was super discouraging. I felt like I need to have IT help me, but there's not enough people in IT. What's changed now is there are a lot of applications that are for the business user that allow the business user to be a developer in some respects. And that's been very empowering. And so for us, many of our teams now create their own dashboards, again, through our own platform, but it's just fantastic. It's game changing. And if I had had that product 8 years ago, I think I would have really been a hero and been very creative, but I didn't have it at the time.
I actually think,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually think it's totally changed the way that the function is viewed as well. In the sense that, 20 years ago, when I started, it was all mainframes, right? And it was reporting. That was really the role of a finance professional, was to do reporting. And I think, now you don't do that as much. There's a demand from the business team for analytics and to serve the growth function of the company versus just providing information. And I think that's something that would have been unimaginable, really, just a couple years ago, even. I
was just going to ask, do you all have analytics teams within your finance organizations, or are they only within the business? Or I'm just interested. We have analytics folks who are in finance, and then we actually have analytics teams that are in the business, and I think that works really well because they can work together. They have different ways of coming at things and different perspectives, and so I was just wondering, do you all?
Same. We're the
same. Okay.
We have our analytics team reports to the CEO, but they sit right next to me.
Okay, interesting.
So Jenny, how did you sort of get to that point, from when you were at eBay and you guys were pushing paper and you were begging for data, to Smartsheet, which is a SaaS company that's growing really well?
Well, I mean, I've always appreciated technology, but being a little bit older, I didn't grow up with it per se. I didn't have my first computer until I was like 23. And so I ended up leaving eBay and going to Box. And the story is that I went from working for someone who was older than me to working for someone who was in their 20s. And I was closer to 50, I would say. Some people made fun of me going to work for someone who was 22 years younger than me. But I actually felt like so lucky because he worked differently and he was so much more efficient. And the technology that they were using at the time was just like, wow. And so I learned a lot from him. I became a lot more tech savvy and appreciative of how the millennial worked, which was very different than how I worked. I used to do all the work versus like let the system do the work for me. So that really helped me to sort of continue in SaaS, and now I work for a company that's SaaS, and it's really helped.
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend that maybe some folks in this room should work for someone 22 years younger?
Everybody can learn however they learn, I'm sure. For me, it helped. I was hands-on.
Mm-hmm. And Khozema, you came from General Electric, which is a massive enterprise and a target customer for many SaaS companies. I'm wondering how being a finance professional changes or evolves from being at a very large company, even within a unit, it still has a large parent company, to being at a smaller company.
Well, I think some things are the same, some things are different. I mean, I think one clear advantage that we had at GE was you're a very large purchaser in these kinds of decisions, and so you have tremendous volume leverage, right? And so you can get a good deal, and you have the ability, because of the multi-business nature of it, to pick multiple vendors at the same time and get a little bit of volume leverage there as well. So I think that's one very significant dynamic that, relative to Twilio, that is a little bit harder. I think on the flip side, I think Twilio has grown up as a company that's fundamentally digitally native, which GE really wasn't, right? And so I think with Twilio, the advantage is that because we grew up in the cloud, because we're an API-based company, because we use a platform, we adopt many of the same methods, practices, analytics that you would expect from the broader marketplace. And so I think that's a huge advantage in terms of the way that we approach technology purchasing decisions, because in the same way that we're trying to buy different things from different vendors, we're also out there trying to sell things to different folks, our customers, and so it's a very natural act in many ways that's quite matched.
Mm-hmm. And Michelle, you're representing a company that's the most mature among these three, and so I'm wondering, how have you guys
Yes.
how have you guys at Intuit really navigated digital transformation? And as a finance professional, how do you think about competing priorities of perhaps an expensive transition versus being able to harness some of the latest tools?
It's been interesting because, I laugh, we are the most mature at, whopping 30 years. But when you think back 30 years, I have to laugh because you say it's great that Twilio really came into the digital age, and, Intuit didn't. I mean, we started as a DOS company, going from DOS to the web. That was a huge thing. And web to the cloud and mobile and now platform. And it's been a huge change for us. And to be able to continue to make those changes has been very, very difficult. But we have been able to continue to reinvent ourselves. From a finance professional and really thinking about how do we continue to do those kinds of things, I think that now where we are, we have a huge advantage, finance professionals, in being able to make those kinds of decisions, because you do have so much more data and technology at your hands, and you can really look in much more real time, make decisions going forward, versus, as you said, Jenny, I mean, so much of what we used to do was just historical because you never had the time to focus on actually looking at any data going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Jenny, I'm wondering, as you look across all the things that Smartsheet is spending money on, all of the vendors that you have in software and perhaps hardware, when you look at line items, how do you determine, what's your process in figuring out, is this actually worth spending the company's money on or not?
Well, we have, I think we use like 80 different SaaS providers. Our CEO loves to experiment with new SaaS to see what takes and what doesn't take. We're actually a big user of Workplace by Facebook. And at first I thought, I'm not going to use that at work. And now I love it. I put pictures up there. It's just like I'm doing it on my personal, but it's all work related. So we look at the impact it's going to have. And actually one of the initiatives we have this year is continuing to evolve our processes and systems, reducing friction so that we can continue to grow and grow fast. So we look at the selling cycle, and how do you leverage all of the sales applications that are out there. We're not a believer in using just one solution. We look at best of breed within each category. We did just subscribe to a system that I would highly recommend to everyone who is in here that tracks usage of licenses for each of our software applications. So we can now track how many people have actually logged in to this application over the last 90 days. And I'm very excited about it. I just approved it yesterday, I think it was. it's going to give us a lot of visibility into, shelfware. And that's always a concern for me because it's a low ROI return.
Mm-hmm. And what's the name of that tool?
Well, there's several out there. I think the one that we're going with is called Xylo. But if anyone has a better one, let me know. 'Cause in a year, we can revisit the decision. It's an annual prepay, as most SaaS is these days.
And maybe you'll decide Xylo is too expensive.
It's reasonable. We actually, that was important to me, right? And I think we got a cost that we can easily get the return if it delivers its value. So.
And Khozema, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, sort of price creep within SaaS. One of the appealing things, Jenny was just saying that her CEO, Mark Mader, likes to try out new things, and you really can because it seems like, the price to entry is very low. It might be a certain amount per user per month. Some models are freemium, and so you can start for free. But when you are starting to use at scale, and Twilio is a growing company, how do you kind of think about how much you're paying for the same service, from one contract or billing period to the next?
So we think about it a lot. I mean, it's a huge topic, and I think part of the implication is as well, there's a certain amount of lock-in effect with some of these products too. We use a similar product. I cannot for the life of me think of the name of it, that also seeks to kind of root out where there's unused licenses and where we have this shelfware, as Jenny said, which is a huge problem. We look very, very carefully at where we have duplicative software. So with the experimentation, which we encourage as well, comes also a number of different tools that quite literally do exactly the same thing. And so we try to root that out, to the degree that we can. And then I think, as we get larger and continue on our growth trajectory, part of the pitch that we make with our vendors is, hey, look, we want to be in a long-term relationship, but the economics are important to us. And to be able to pull off a long-term relationship with you all, we've got to have, not per se a balance of trade, but there's got to be something in it for both sides in which we really feel like it's a partnership, where we're not just being sold to all the time. And I think AWS, for example, I think is a pretty good example of that, where sure, we use a lot of cloud consumption with that particular partner, but at the same time, there's a tremendous amount of innovation on that platform, and there tends to be price deflation, right? So we feel pretty good about the experience that we've had, for example, with AWS.
Michelle, you seem to agree.
No, I totally agree with that on 2 points. Number one, for us, it's not so much not using licenses, but it really is duplicative tools. And that's one thing that we've focused on a lot over the last year is really looking at how many tools do we really have that are solving the same thing? For a long time in our company, our business units have been very, very strong. And so it's kind of been, hey, we love the experimentation, go do what you want. And now we're trying to drive much more standardization across the company as we become more of one ecosystem and serving customers across the company. It makes it so much easier when you've got some of those tools. And then to your point with AWS, I think that's an awesome opportunity of how the partnership, it has to be a win-win for both. That is a great example. We've had the same experience with them. We could never have begun to innovate as quickly as we are now using AWS in our own data centers that we had for years.
Jenny, a lot of people say that AWS is a tax that many companies are just going to have to pay at some point. I'm wondering how you think about picking the right cloud provider and whether you should go on multiple as a way to keep them honest from a financial standpoint, or whether you think some of the benefits of going all in and harnessing the tools across all of your data and computing would be beneficial.
I'm the type of person who always likes to have backup plans. Like, I don't like not to have backup plans. And so today, if you're going with just an AWS, if you're going with a Azure or a Google or wherever else there is, it's a little bit hard to move quickly. I don't know. My experience is you can't move very quickly. So I think you've got to find that partner you can trust. And to what they just said, that you have a good relationship, trusted relationship that, my biggest fear is I get done with my 1, 2, or 3-year contract and now I can't easily switch and they increase the price by 80%. I haven't planned for that, so.
Has that happened before?
No, but it's something that, it's never perfect, let's just say. So I think AWS is probably very, very good, and yeah, I mean, I think they're all probably good, but you also have to look at service and function and best-in-class product, and you're going to pay for that as well.
Right, of course. And Khozema, I'm wondering, now that we are in a time in which companies are adopting software and different software vendors at the business unit level and sometimes the team level, how much insight are you getting at Twilio, what, say, your developers are using? I mean, you guys sell to developers at other companies, so this phenomenon has clearly been beneficial to you. But how do you sort of think about that and think about visualizing all of the tools that everyone is using across the company?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, we try not to be patriarchal about it, right? I mean, we want the teams that are going to be using these tools to be the ones that adopt them themselves, and for that to happen organically. And I mean, we obviously involve our purchasing team to make sure that we get good price and stuff like that. But I think fundamentally, we want tool adoption to be driven by the teams that are using them. And I think as long as there's a pull from developers, as you refer to them, or users more broadly, then that's really the way that we try to deploy software. I think the other dynamic is the one thing we're always looking for, which is kind of the higher order value that we're all seeking in finance, is how do you abstract that data in a way in which data sets that were not necessarily meant to be connected can be, so that you can gain some greater insights. And so if you can combine data, for example, out of your ERP and your CRM, well, you just ended up with a much better analytical solution than where you were before. And I think that was effectively impossible a little while ago, and I think that's becoming more and more doable based on some of these analytics tools that have become available.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, your company is the maker of QuickBooks, which many small businesses and some mid-sized businesses use. I'm wondering, if you think it's going to be possible with all the automation that's happening, the artificial intelligence, possible for basically the accounting to run itself, and you guys just sort of supervise. I mean, is that something that you would like, a sort of further automation where from beginning to end, in a quarter, the computers just basically run all of the accounting and you just make sure that the math is right?
Well, for our small businesses, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with QuickBooks. That's what we would love to do, because there's no small business out there who says, wow, I'm here baking, I'm making cupcakes, or I'm doing landscaping, and I just can't wait to get back and do that accounting. I mean, nobody says that. Nobody wants to do accounting. Exactly. Nobody wants to do that. And so that is our whole goal, though, is with AI, with machine learning, with a number of other programs that are available. We have an open platform by design, so that if we're not actually filling the need that a small business has with their accounting system or with whatever they're trying to do from a financial standpoint, that they can plug in other types of apps that will solve that. But that's actually what we're trying to do, is automate that as much as possible, so that they don't have to spend the time actually doing their accounting, but yet they get the result that they want.
Mm-hmm. And Khozema, when you have an allocated, amount of money in order to help Twilio, which is already fast growing, continue to maintain or accelerate when it comes to growth, how are you making those types of decisions about, should I invest in new offices? Should I invest more in R&D? Should I invest more in hiring employees? And to what extent is technology playing a role in making those decisions versus judgment?
It's playing a major role. I think every decision that we make fundamentally is, how can we better use software to drive a better outcome? And I think it's not just to do it for fun, it's to do it with the means of, how do we use software fundamentally to unlock cost over here so that we can redeploy it and drive growth? And I think that fundamentally is what finance is about.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank our panel. Thank you so much, Michelle Clatterbuck, Khozema Shipchandler, and Jenny Ceran. Thank you.